world and the universe, we are one. North, south, east to west, we are one. Glowing hearts full of love, we are one. A blessing from above.
No matter where we're from, we are one. We are one. We are one.
We are one indeed. Dear listeners and viewers, welcome to this weekly episode of your program Spectra. Obtaining citizenship, taking the oath, or being granted the citizenship rather, is the greatest dream for all newcomers, for permanent residents, for new immigrants in their adoptive new country. Although it is a great dream, but we rarely stop and wonder and ponder even about what is citizenship and who is a citizen. And are there different classes for citizens? Like, is there a first-class citizen, second-class citizen? Now, talking about the Canadian citizenship in particular, what are the values of Canadian citizenship? And how is Canada today compared to Canada of the past and compared to Canada of the future? To talk about all of these very important and controversial issues, I'm really delighted to be accompanied for the next hour with the citizenship judge, Albert Wong. Thank you very much for joining us.
It's such an honor to be here today. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you very much for being with us. And you are a citizenship judge, and which is a place of very high authority. And it's not only authority, it's great responsibility.
It's really a pleasure to serve in this way, to serve Canada in this way, and it's an honor. I think I have one of the best jobs in Canada.
Great, absolutely. And so you were once an immigrant.
I was. I came with my family to Canada in 1971 from Malaysia. I was 13 years old then, and I came here with my father, my mother, 2 brothers and 1 sister. I was the oldest. Went to high school here in Canada, in Sudbury, Ontario, which is a mining town just north of 500 kilometers north of Toronto. Mm-hmm. And after finishing high school, I joined the Canadian Armed Forces, and wow. I served for 39 years of the military after that. So it's a thrill.
So definitely this is something we'll be talking about. Mm-hmm. And so how are your feelings as a new immigrant at that time?
When I came, it was an adventure. You got a 13-year-old boy who came from Malaysia. Back then, there was no internet in 1971. Yeah. Very little was known in Malaysia. Very few people knew what Canada was. Mm-hmm. Not many people would want to come to Canada. If you want to emigrate from Malaysia, you would go to Australia, you go to UK. But Canada was new. And so for this young man, at 13 years old, it was a great adventure. But definitely. I'll tell you, when we first saw snow and felt the cold, we said, okay, maybe we made a mistake. But, we really enjoyed every moment of it since then.
Definitely. And how was Canada back there in 1971? Like, is it like Canada of today?
No, very different. In 1971, we were very few. And not much was known about Canada from the east, for example. And we settled in Sudbury because that's really where the only place where my father could find a job. Mm-hmm. He was a principal of a school. He was very well established. My mother was a teacher. They had a wonderful life in Malaysia, but they decided that for the children, we needed to move. And I always tell this story. In 1971 in Malaysia, in Sudbury, which is 500 kilometers away, the closest place that you have to go to buy soy sauce, one of the key ingredients in cooking for Chinese food.
Of course.
Was 500 kilometers away in Toronto. So you had to drive 500 kilometers to buy soy sauce. and for my friends from India, I have met families that lived in Ottawa back in 1971. If you wanted to buy basmati rice, you had to come to Toronto to Gerrard Street.
Whoa.
That's how different Canada is now.
So you need
We're
to keep
so open.
shuttling to downtown
Yes.
whenever
or,
you needed anything.
or if you know someone who's coming to visit you, then you ask them to bring
Okay. Okay.
rice and soy sauce. But that shows you with immigration and the number of people coming in, how diverse we are now. And it shows in our food, in our choice of food. Let me give you one more example.
Please.
And this is 1973. One day we were shopping in a grocery store in Sudbury, and we saw mango.
Wow.
And we said, mango. You never seen that. So we were putting the mangoes in our basket to take out, to check out. And you know how when everybody stops to look at you, that's what happened in the store. So when we checked out the mango at the checkout line, the woman stopped us and she said, "Excuse me, we're all wondering, how do you eat this?" And that shows you how far we've come as a country, as a people.
It was an alien object to them.
It was unknown.
Completely, yeah.
And yet now look at how wonderful and how many types of mangoes we have.
Absolutely. And all year round even.
All year round.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. And so how was it easy? Was it at all easy for you to integrate, to assimilate when you came here at 13 years old? There is no internet at the time. There is no GPS. Like it was very hard for you to communicate with people overseas. So
It was very hard to call back home. We had to go to the post office to get a long distance line. There was no such thing as picking up a phone and calling.
Of course.
And some people might remember those days. But the other thing that I think it's true for almost every immigrant. When you come here to the country, your first priority is to work hard, to establish yourself, to find a house, to find a job, to find a house. The kids are going to school. So you really have put your head down and all you do is work and study. You don't want to make any trouble. You don't want to stand out too much. You just want to get going and get your life going. As you go along and your children become more, and the children, I think, integrate faster because they're going to school, they have friends, they go into school plays, they do different things.
Okay.
And that's good. But the other thing too is that my father and mother, they basically they came to Canada for the children, and they said to themselves, "We'll work hard, and when the children are in university, we'll retire, and then we can go back to Malaysia."
Oh, so that was the plan.
Was the plan. That was the original plan. In a way, it was just to help them to get over the shock of going to a new place. As we went to university and we were moving up, the children were moving up. The plan then was we'll retire and go to Vancouver.
Okay.
So they were slowly moving east. And
Okay.
the reality was they retired and they stayed in Toronto because really that's where the children were. That's where life is. That's where all their friends are now. That's where the grandchildren's going to be. So that's why you start to establish that life around you. The whole world change centered around here.
And was language a barrier for you at all, or for any members of your family?
It wasn't for us because we went to school in English in Malaysia.
Okay.
So that was an advantage for us. I appreciate people who come to Canada and they have to learn a new language. They have to learn a new life, a new way of doing things.
Of course.
I'll give this example. And when I speak to settlement workers, for example, people who help immigrants establish, I say, listen, we take things for granted that we have to help people to understand. So, for example, we say to somebody, I found you a job. You're going to go to work at this place tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock, and you're working to 4 o'clock. Does he bring his lunch? What happens when you go to work here in Canada? Do you get fed or do you have to bring your own food? And if you bring your own food, can you heat it up or should I? Because in many countries, a sandwich is a foreign thing.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
That's a foreign food.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So when you say, why don't you go to work? Maybe we need to also say, here's how you go to work. What should I wear? And if it's 8 o'clock, does that mean I arrive at 8 o'clock or do I arrive earlier? Do I change at work? Do I bring my lunch? How would I bring a lunch? So I remember that because when we were going to school, we wanted to buy, every child should have a packed lunch to go to school. So we go to the grocery to the department store, and you see all these things that you can buy for your child, but you don't know what to buy.
Of course, yeah. You don't know, like,
Is it a backpack?
cultural norms and yeah.
And the poor child does not want to stand out.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Of course,
if the child, if everybody's eating sandwich, I can tell you the child does not want to bring a curry.
definitely. You don't want to be stigmatized.
You don't want to be standing out.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
So let's help people so they feel comfortable going to work or going to school.
Definitely. So you're talking about a very different Canada than the Canada we know today.
Mhm.
And so let me ask you, which one do you like better?
I like the Canada that we've grown into. Back then, it was a beautiful country. It was a very clean, very pristine. The population was very small. We prided ourselves in we were playing out in the street, street hockey or football and things like that. But the reality as well was I was the only Chinese in high school. I don't think anybody can say that anymore.
Yeah, of course.
But back then in 1971, I can say that. And so you have no one to follow as an example. Whereas now there's many more examples. I'm not saying that we're perfect, not far from perfect at all. In fact, we have a lot of things that we can do better. But the Canada we've grown into is a multicultural society that invites people in, but more than just inviting people in as guests, we invite them in as relatives. You put your shoulder together. We work together. We're gonna grow together. That's the difference, I think, in Canada. Do we have a lot more to do? Yes, in many areas. And one area I'll point out, and I think we might want to discuss this, one area that we want to, especially for an immigrant community, a newcomer community, how do I relate to the First Nations, who were the original people for here?
Absolutely.
I think that's a dialogue that we should have as well.
Definitely. We will be talking rather extensively about this topic towards the end of this hour. But going to the Army, why did you choose that?
I don't know. I always wanted to do it. Even my parents were confused because they were, again, your typical immigrant family. We'll work hard. We'll sacrifice ourselves. We'll work hard so that the children can go to school. And go to school means get good marks so you can become a doctor.
Okay.
And if you cannot become a doctor, okay, become an engineer.
Yeah, which is...
and then you move down the line.
It is the typical mindset for a lot of parents around the world.
Most families. Exactly.
Exactly.
And it's around the world. Going to the military was not even an idea that they would have had. I think if you stopped them and asked them back then, I think they would have said to you, we didn't come all this way so that my son will go to the Army.
Okay.
Right? But I'll tell you, by the time I joined and my father reconciled himself, and he actually wrote a letter to the Sudbury Star. And in the letter, he said, my son, we came to Canada at 5 years ago. My son is now joining the military. And I think it's right because Canada's given so much to us. It's a way for us to repay back to Canada. So he wrote a beautiful letter. He didn't tell me about it.
Oh,
he just did it. And I actually only found out when I read it in the paper. So he never told me about it. So that was a beautiful moment. But then now after 39 years when I retired, he was there when I retired. And he also realized how much the military career had given me. So I had gained as much as I had given. I probably had gained more than I could have given back to Canada. So it was a career. And,
definitely.
And he appreciated that.
But weren't you at all worried of being like a visible minority in the Army?
Yeah, I was in the armed forces. I started in the Navy, and then I did a lot of other work. But I was definitely a visible minority. I think when I joined in 1976, you could have counted on just fingers the number of Chinese Canadians in the military. But did I face overt discrimination? No. But were there barriers? Yes. So a good example I'll give you is that I didn't realize this, but the recruiters basically looked at all the class that I was going into, the 1976 entry level, and they said, this guy will be the first one to fail.
Oh.
And I can understand that, because you see, in 1976, if you went to LA Central Casting and said, I'm doing a movie and I want a soldier, I would not have come out.
Yes.
A big Rambo would have come out.
Of course, yeah.
And I'm not Rambo, right? And so I do not look the part. So they could not reconcile. It's like the mango. They could not reconcile. How do you deal with this? What they couldn't understand was tenacity. There was no way I was going to give up.
So you had the grit.
The
you
grit.
really had the grit,
Yes.
and you're really holding hard to it.
But I'll tell you where some part of the grit comes from. I realize, and I think most immigrants will tell you the same thing: we cannot fail. You've come all this way, and you're going to take this risk. You better not fail. And that's where the determination and grit can come in. And I appreciate there's a lot of pressure on our kids when you do that, right? I appreciate that, but they couldn't understand where that tenacity. So that's why they said, "Oh, he's most likely to fail because look at he's not that strong."
Yeah, you're not the typical kind of soldier that they had in mind.
Yeah.
But let me ask you another question here. Weren't you ever labeled by other members of the army saying, "Hey, you're not a Canadian. You're not patriotic enough. This is not really your country. Are you willing to sacrifice your life for this country? You have another country. You have dual citizenship." Did you get any?
I was lucky in a sense that I never had to face that inside the military. And partly because there was no question. We were all wearing the same uniform. We were all doing the same thing. And I also have to admit, and I'll be the first one to tell you, I think if I was a certain race or from a certain religion, I might have faced something, at least not overtly, but at least the doubt is in the mind. So then it's for me to prove that they were wrong. So that's unfair. But I did face it outside. So even when I was in uniform, have I had Canadians come and say, "Why are you in the uniform?" Or in one case, this man said, "You're an immigrant and you shouldn't be. I don't believe you. I don't trust you."
Okay.
And there's always going to be people like that. How we deal with that situation and how we move forward with our dignity is the most important thing.
Did you ever think that there will be a day when a minister of defense will be someone from a Sikh background? Did you ever think of that or ever dream of that at the time?
No, never thought. But I met Minister Hajan when he was in the military, and he had just come back from Afghanistan, and he was a major, and we were actually talking. I'll tell you exactly where we were in Nathan Phillips Square at Khalsa Day. And it's a very big religious day for a celebration for the Sikh religion.
Yeah.
And he and I were standing there, brothers in arms, 2 officers, and I was saying, "Wow, this is fantastic."
Absolutely. Minister of Defense with his Sikh turban, everything, nothing changed. And his name is clearly, a Sikh name, an Indian name.
Yeah.
But he is the Minister of Defense. So,
Yes.
How more Canadian can you be?
And is he I'll tell you what I know about Minister Sajan. I cannot call him Hajit anymore because I respect him so much. He's probably one of the strongest men I've known. And did he face, doubts whether he should be in the military or doubts about his loyalty? That's for him to answer. But I can tell you that he proved himself by being one of the strongest soldiers possible and one of the hardest working officer that you could find. So again, it's a part of that immigration story, how you prove yourself, and we overcompensate. We have to work harder than the average Canadian just to show, hey, look at me, I can do this. So has he done that? Yes. That's what I saw with my eyes.
But again, merit really, is the most important factor,
Yes.
So if you're really good at what you do,
Yes.
and you excel in it.
And I'm sure everybody will bring the merit to the table. I think what the Canadian society does as well is it allows you to show your merit.
Mm-hmm.
Just because you have merit, but if nobody allows you the space to show it, then your merit is a lost commodity.
Definitely.
That's a capacity that's lost.
So
And
you have
it's a loss to Canada.
You have the opportunity to show to reach your full potential.
Correct.
Without any interruptions based on like race or gender and
Correct.
whatnot. Let's take a short musical break and we'll be back. Don't go away.
Around the world and the universe, we are one. North, south, east to west, we are one. Glowing hearts full of love, we are one. A blessing from above.
No matter where we're from, we are one. We are one. We are one. Canada, our precious land, our Canada. We all work hand in hand, and we stand together. Nothing can go wrong. All the people from around the world, that's what makes us strong. This place we all call our home, the land of the free. Together we can build our lives, a place for you and me. Yeah.
We are one. Walking together all across the nation. Around the world and the universe, we are one.
We are one, yeah.
We are one, north, south, east, and west, all united in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, the Canadian Army today is a real representation of this.
It is. And if you go to, we were just talking about Minister Sajan, and he became a commanding officer.
Mm-hmm.
But he was in the reserves. He became a commanding officer of an armored regiment in Vancouver, and he was also a police officer in Vancouver. If you come to the Toronto Scottish Regiment, which is a Scottish Highland regiment, so they wear kilts,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
in Toronto, you will find that the diversity in that unit. You have Chinese soldiers, Chinese Canadians, you have Sikh Canadians, you have Muslims, you have everybody in there. And I'll tell you one of my favorite stories. When I was in Afghanistan for a year, one of the captains in Kandahar was from Edmonton as a captain, and he's a Muslim cleric.
Mm-hmm.
And he deployed as a Canadian soldier in a Canadian uniform as a captain, but he was our padre. He was our religious leader.
Oh.
So he gave us spiritual guidance to everybody, all the Canadians.
Regardless of their faith.
Regardless. And I think that comes back to your song, But We Are One. I think that's the strength that Canada shows, that we allow people to do what they need to do.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not, that's utopic. And of course, do you feel discrimination? Do you face discrimination? Of course it's there. You're going to find bias? Of course it's there.
Mm-hmm.
How we deal with it together, I think, tells you what the society is, how society protects each other.
Definitely. Again, Canada is a very multicultural mosaic. You have this great canvas with all the different colors. It's not a monochromatic society. It's not a monotonous society.
Mm-hmm.
So you have all these different backgrounds side by side and so on. But many people would say, okay, we do have people from all different parts, all four corners of the globe in the Army. We also have them in ministries at work and whatnot. But how about if we're talking about merit, really,
Mm-hmm.
how about our experience before coming to Canada?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm, an expert accountant. I'm an expert lawyer. I'm an expert teacher. I'm an expert doctor,
Mm-hmm.
physician,
Mm-hmm.
Engineer, whatnot. So, but I come here and then you tell me, no, wait a minute. There are a lot of extra studies you need to do, and it's a lengthy process, and it costs a lot too.
Yes.
So
when we bring people to Canada, as immigrants or even as foreign workers. We want them because of the skills they bring.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and there was a ceremony in Labrador City, which is very far up north,
Mm-hmm.
and there was 25 people who became Canadians, and most of them were Filipinos. But when you talk to the mayor of Labrador City, he would tell you, these are my nurses, my HVAC technicians, my plumbers, my carpenters, my electricians. They are critical to the survival of the city. So we want those skills. In Canada, it's a developed country, and there's organized society, and in any organized society, you have regulations in how people will act and behave. So we therefore, when you come over, and I'll take the example of a doctor, high status around the world, and they come to Canada, and now suddenly, like you said, they have to face all these exams. We need to work out a better system. We're working on it, but we need to speed up the process where they can get the exams done quickly, get accredited quickly, and therefore serve the people quicker. There are roadblocks along the way, and I know the government is working and seeing how we can reduce that roadblock without compromising the service, the quality of service. That's the issue. So, for example, electrician, wonderful. And I might be a master electrician in Malaysia, but I still need to understand the rules and regulations of what an electrician can or cannot do in Canada before I can be certified.
Yeah.
Now, once I get certified, do I become a master electrician again? Probably not. I have to start from the bottom again. You know, and difficult as it is, it's still not impossible. And I'll give my father as an example. He was a principal of a school, 41 years old when he came. The first job he got, janitor. But by the time he retired at 65, he was a first-class stationary engineer. And he became a stationary engineer by self-study. He basically did all the exams himself. So I think it's not, you're invited into the country, the opportunities there, you have to work for it. If you're willing to do it, you can have it. But it will not be given to you just because you had status back home. That's, I think, the difference.
You know, like on the other side, I'd always, of course, like to represent the other side. It's not necessarily what I think, but some people might argue, say, you know, like, it's not like, you know, we're not coming here because it's not a charity organization. So if Canada, you know, doesn't really need us, they would never let us come. So it's mutual benefit for both. So why are you making it hard for us? You know,
I think it's definitely not a mutual benefit, but it is also a benefit to come to Canada, and you know, because of the lifestyle, the peace, the comfort that is in the country. Can it be faster? Can it be smoother? Yes. I think the balance is, how do I ensure regulation and regulatory behavior to make sure that you're qualified? So that when somebody walks in the door and says, I'm an electrician, we know there's a certain level of standard and qualification. But how do we strip it so that it's not onerous? We should not make it impossible. It should be possible. But now, let's make sure that our regulations make sense. And I think that's what the government is working on, both provincially and federally.
So it's like the government right now is working on making it less daunting, less, you know, like stressful to be like certified, like trying to get rid of as many impediments on the way that's holding people back.
Today I had 2 ceremonies in the Mississauga office, and I had a doctor, I had 2 architects. This Monday, I had 2 ceremonies in Scarborough. I had 4 architects in the room.
Whoa!
And all of them re-qualified as architects.
Oh, so
working as architects. I had dentists, nurses, and you know, and then you'll find some people who are struggling. And especially when they're trying to put food on a table. You cannot be just studying because they had to keep the family going. So I appreciate that. Have I found people with master's degrees from India driving a taxi? Yes. And should they have a better job? You bet. And we should help them to find that.
Okay, so let me ask you about a couple of terms here. I'd
Mm-hmm.
like you to define them for me, please, because I think they're very, very critical. They're
Yes.
extremely important. And we'll be talking in general first, and then we'll go into specifics about Canada. But how would you define the word citizenship in general? What is citizenship?
That's actually a very good term to define because we throw that around a lot.
Yeah.
And especially around the world right now, who's citizen and who's not. Here's how I define citizenship. It is an agreement of how we're going to come together and live together, and how we're going to work together, how we're going to play together. And it's a sense of belonging.
Okay.
I actually had a young boy from Yemen, and he became and we were actually in the Aga Khan Museum when we did that ceremony. And he was coming from Yemen, and his family was here. And he was asked to you in the citizenship ceremony. And he said, well, and he was, I think, 10 years old at that time. He said, up to now, we've been in Canada as a permanent resident, and it's been wonderful for us. I've been going to school. My parents have been working. But up to now, it feels like we've been renting.
Oh, okay.
But today we bought.
Okay.
And I think that's what it is. It's that next level of commitment, both by the person to the country, but also from the country and community to that person. And I think that's the difference of citizenship and that ownership. Now, could I, before you ask the next question, but when I define citizenship, I'm always very conscious of the fact that as I'm a citizen of Canada, and I say to people, welcome, congratulations, you're now a Canadian citizen, I'm always very conscious of the fact that before us, for thousands of years before us, we had people who have been here, and they are First Nations. They're an indigenous population. Yeah. And I think the definition of citizenship with them is also very different because they were the original inheritors of this earth.
Definitely. Okay, so like we have some kind of agreement, or like, between a certain like human polity or human like society.
Correct.
And if you concur, if we come to a certain consensus, and any new person who agrees to these things and is qualified to meet these different criteria, then he or she is qualified to become a citizen.
Correct.
And now, okay, so according to the current law, you will need to reside in Canada for a specific number of days, and have some level of language proficiency, and a clean criminal record, and that's it, basically, more or less.
The first thing that a person has to do to become a Canadian citizen is to become a permanent resident.
Yeah.
So you must be a permanent resident to become a Canadian citizen.
Definitely.
So that's the first criteria. Secondly, the person must apply.
Yeah.
We will not force you to take citizenship. So you actually have to physically apply to say, I want to be a Canadian citizen. Then you come to the criteria, the factors that you just spoke about. Between the ages of 18 and 55, you have to write a knowledge test. And you have to study for it. Most born Canadians would probably fail.
Okay, yeah.
but you have to study for it. You also have to show that you're proficient in one of the two languages, English or French, to a basic level, not an expert level, but a good level. Then you have to be in the 5 years before your application. That's why they have to apply. That date of application is very important. In the 5 years before that, you had to be physically present in Canada 1,095 days. 3 years.
Yeah.
Out of 5 years.
So a couple of things here. First thing is language. And so you need to be a level 4 or niveau 4 for the French.
Oui.
Okay. So you need to be and you need to be level 4 in listening and speaking only.
Yes.
Not in reading and writing. No. Now, does this make sense to you for a couple of reasons? First of all, you write a test. And so you must read. So if you're only 4 in listen, why isn't there a requirement for you to have at least a 4 in reading.
Yeah.
And that's number one. So the other thing is, like, if you go back to Malaysia now, and if I go back to Egypt, my country of origin, and then I'm speaking very rusty Egyptian Arabic, or you're speaking very rusty Malaysian, would people really believe that you're Malaysian, or people believe that I'm Egyptian?
Right.
Probably not, right?
So we don't define our citizenship by how you look, by your color of your skin, by your religion, or even your eloquence, right? So the purpose of the knowledge and the language test, it comes back down to the very original basis. Do you know enough about Canada so you know what you're signing up for? Very simple. The governance of this country, how our background is, a little bit of our history, the role of the military, and the importance of responsible government, that we actually elect a member of parliament. So that's the basis of that. So the language also skills is to help you to understand a little bit of what's going on around you.
Okay.
So that you're not stuck in your own silo or ethnic silo.
Yeah.
And that you can actually move out and move anywhere in the world, in the country. The other thing that's also important about the knowledge and both the language now is that it also gives you an insight into the rights that you have. When we say as a Canadian citizen, you have a lot of rights and responsibilities. Well, if you don't understand the rights and responsibilities, it's a moot point because you cannot exercise it.
Yeah.
So that's what we want, is an active, engaged citizen. The written, I take your point about, your level 4 oral, listening and speaking, but what about writing? Well, if you fail your language, your knowledge test, you actually can do it orally.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. So that's why we're not using it as a way to screen people out as much as a way to make sure that you understand what you're doing.
But
I think that's the difference.
But isn't language part and parcel of culture? Like, you cannot divide them. Like, if we talk about the academic definition of culture, like, language is part and parcel of culture.
Yeah.
So if you're level 4 in the language, most probably you're level 4 in the culture too.
Yeah.
Because why didn't you improve your language? Level 4. So just for our listeners and viewers, we're talking about level 4 out of 12 different levels.
Yeah.
So you're basically you're just a beginner. You're an advanced beginner. Level 4 is the advanced beginner.
You understand a little bit what's going on around you in the world.
Yeah.
Right. However, let me point out, just because you have a level 4 in English, as an example, does not mean that you have level 4 on human rights. You have 100% human rights. So it is a way for you to become an active citizen, to work in our society. Will you increase that? Hopefully. But we do not judge someone's level of citizenship or commitment to this country on the language. So if I had level 4 to become a Canadian citizen, but my aspiration is to become a chartered accountant.
Okay.
Now I need to improve myself up to level 12 to understand the tax laws. But if I decided that I'm in level 4 and really my aspiration is to, and don't get me wrong, I'm a terrible cook, but let's say I want to start a restaurant and it happens to be a Chinese restaurant, I can exist very well in that community, even with a wide variety of restaurant clients coming in from different races and religion.
Yeah.
But my access to the system, access to justice, access to rights are available to me 100%. So, for example, if I ended up having to go to court and I only have level 4, the court will assign me a translator.
Yeah, definitely.
I think that's the beauty of this society.
It is, but like, some people think that, the government, the system is sort of pampering people too much, and people are really taking advantage of this. because, like, why are you a level 4 in English or French? You've stayed here for at least 3 years. By the time you go and write your test, you're like, you've stayed here for about 4 years. Canada offers free language education in English and French. And you're eager to become a citizen. So what is your problem, really? And in these centers that provide language education, you'll be subsidized, you'll get support from the government, you'll get free daycare for the children. And so in 4 years, so you advance 1 level per year. This is unheard of. Well, like, really, if like the very, very average student would advance a minimum of 2 levels per year. So you should be no less than level 8, not 4.
Let me tell you this. I came to Canada from Malaysia when I was 13 years old. I went to an English school.
Yeah.
My level of Chinese is almost a 4-year-old. I'm 62 years old. If you tell me now that I should conduct myself in written language and listening, oral comprehension, and writing a Chinese, because I'm a citizenship judge and I should communicate with the community in a certain way, I would tell you I'll fail.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Because my age will be against me. My capacity to learn a new language will be against me. But I'll tell you, if I had a child, my granddaughter is 1 year old now. She'll probably pick it up.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Right? So it's so dependent on individuals. Some people have capacity for languages, and I admire that. Other people might not, like me.
Okay.
Right, a Luddite. And so what I think we need in a society is, yes, that's the standard, level 4. And yes, like you said, people can progress 1 year per level. But I think we need that. Canada is a society that offers you an opportunity to establish a life, provide safety for your family, and opportunity for your children, and encourages to increase your own capacity, but it will allow you to exist and live in safety and security.
Okay. Yeah.
Despite that.
Definitely. But okay, so if let's say now that I'm a level 4 English or French student, and so are you. And your like your mother tongue is Mandarin, for instance. My mother tongue is Arabic.
Yeah.
So how do you expect us, and both of us are Canadian citizens, good Canadian citizens, how do you expect us to communicate?
I think we do very well. I think in Canada, if you watch, you and I can walk into a Lebanese restaurant.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
somehow communicate. You and I can. I think, and maybe this is one of the things that we should start to export as Canada. That we all have come from backgrounds, and we're all very proud of our backgrounds.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are things in Egypt that you're very proud of. What a historic civilization, right?
Definitely.
And same thing with China. However, we now come to a new country where what I have, let me share with you, and what you have, you're sharing with me.
Yeah.
I think that's the difference. So language, of course, can be improved. Absolutely.
Yeah.
However, is it a barrier? Let's not make it. Can be a barrier if we want to make it that way, but let's not make it this way. So, for example, I see an older woman get on a bus in Toronto.
Okay.
And they might have a hard time expressing where they want to go, but I see other people in the bus helping them.
Okay. Yeah.
I think that's what speaks about our society. I think we should, maybe it's because of the cold in Canada, the snow.
Okay, but like, you and I can communicate using level 4 English, but would you and I become intimate friends? Like, how will I express my feelings to you? Level 4 is not enough at all. At all. It's like, if I want to, confide in you, express my feelings, I can't do that.
No.
Same thing for you.
No.
So at the end of the day, if I want to, like have an intimate friend, I would always resort to people from my cultural background.
Yes. However, I think your willingness to open your house to me and my willingness to open your house to you and your family allows a certain level of intimacy. Will it get as deep an intimacy as if we were both Egyptians and we're sitting in Cairo? No.
Okay.
But that's really for a small select group of people anyway. The
Mhm.
whole country does not have to be intimate, right?
Okay.
Where I think that level 4 allows, and you wanted to talk about level 4 language skills. Where that level 4 allows us to do is we become friends.
Mhm.
And that if we happen to come to a Chinese restaurant and you just don't understand one part of the menu, that I would get up and help you.
Yeah, we can communicate, but
Right.
we cannot like
Be
the level
intimate.
of we cannot be intimate.
Mhm.
We
And-
cannot be that close.
Mhm.
And the problem is here, this is the major problem. Because if I have a lot of stereotypes in my mind,
Mhm.
about your culture,
Yes.
and you have a lot of stereotypes about my culture too.
How do we break that?
Exactly. And you're level 4, I'm level 4.
Yeah.
There is no way using level 4,
Yeah.
I'll break these stereotypes. You'll break these stereotypes. So, like you said, we'll be living in our ethnic silos. You'll be in your silo,
Mhm.
in your self-chosen ghetto. You're in a contained place. You're in a small capsule
Mhm.
of Chinese people. I'm in a small capsule of Egyptian people, and that's it. And day by day, the stereotypes that I have in me will grow and grow and grow. Same thing with you again. And, day by day, I will not be interested even in talking to you.
Mhm.
Maybe I would be even aggressive towards you.
Mhm.
You are
And-
from this background, and you
and
guys,
that's a potential.
yeah,
That's always a potential, and I think that's why we have to guard against it. And it's not because I'm on this platform right now, but let me commend, for example, Arab FM.
Mhm.
You could have had a total station on just Arab languages.
Absolutely, yeah.
The fact that we're doing this interview in English is
Mhm.
fantastic. I think it's
Yeah.
fantastic. So that's one level. Can a person survive, let's say in Toronto, me survive solely on my Chinese languages and only go to Chinese owned businesses that have Chinese signs
Mhm.
on the wall and that's it? Of course I can.
Yes.
But I have chosen to limit my life. If I really want to expand my life,
Mhm.
then I have to be outreach, right? But for me to know you, we have some commonality.
Yeah.
But I do not need to learn Arabic as much as you do not need to learn Chinese to get to know each other, right? So let me then say this as well.
Mhm.
Our children. I think our future is with our children.
Okay.
You look at how they interact. Look at the different marriages that happen. I find that fascinating. So, because one of the questions we ask people is, what are you? In my case, I'm Chinese.
Mhm.
Because both my parents were Chinese, my great-grandparents were Chinese. It's 100% Chinese. My daughter is half Chinese, 1/4 Irish. I have to get this right. Irish. She calls herself a mongrel. She's a mix. And you know what? My granddaughter is now 1/8 Chinese.
Whoa. Okay.
And there's there's Polish mix and there's a whole bunch of mixes. And so in the end, when we say to somebody, who are you? I think the answer is going to be Canadian.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I think
definitely.
that's the difference. That's what's going to break the silos.
Yeah. So you're betting more on children.
I have a lot of hope for. We're in a messy world right now. We're very. It's a troubled world. Look at climate change. Look at the pollution that's in there. I think our generation we've messed it up.
Mhm.
I think that our grandchildren, our children will be the ones that are cleaning
And
up.
what do you think of cultural centers? Like if we have a Chinese cultural center, like, an Egyptian cultural center, an Indian culture center, et cetera, et cetera. Do you think that these centers help people integrate, or do they really pull them back and isolate them and marginalize them more? Because you're creating a comfort zone for them.
I think most. I'll come back to the Chinese experience. The first time that Chinatown was formed was more for their own protection because there was significant discrimination. So they were looking after themselves. But as a new immigrant, you would go to the place because it's comfortable. You know what you want, and you can get services in that language.
Yeah.
I agree with that. But as you get more and more established in society, you find that most people actually move out and they start to buy into different neighborhoods. And so that's where that difference is. Are there uses for cultural centers? Yes, for two reasons. One, to me, a cultural center should be one that helps you to celebrate your culture, but also invite other people to come in. So I relished, and in fact, I was with Minister Sajan when I did that. I relished going to a Gurdwara.
Okay.
You know, you get free lunch there, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's beautiful. I've been to a wedding in a mosque. No, not a wedding in a mosque, but you know, a Islamic wedding.
Yeah.
And I think that's what this society allows us to do. If you choose, you can actually go and access that.
Definitely.
And I think that's the difference in this society. Do we have to protect it? Yes. Can it be fragile? Yes.
Yeah.
Because you've seen people come and attack it. But we should promote that. Can
it be fragile? Yeah, let's take a commercial break. But after the commercial break, we really need to talk about can it be fragile? It's a very important thing. Don't go away.
هل تريد بيع، شراء أو استئجار عقار سكني أو تجاري؟ هل تبحث عن خدمات عقارية في تورونتو، ميسيساغا أو أي من المدن القريبة؟ والآن وكيلة العقارات سهير البشير تقدم لكم خدماتها المميزة مع مصداقية مشهودة في التعامل. كل ما عليك فعله هو الاتصال على الرقم 647-993-1967 أو عبر موقعنا على الإنترنت suhairalbashir.ca. سهير البشير لخدماتك العقارية.
And we're back again with Citizenship Judge Albert Wong. We're talking about how fragile is the Canadian structure, because these cultural centers and cultural schools, many people will argue, they don't give this service for free. Many of these cultural centers, officially, they don't ask for anything in return, but they would ask for obedience. They, like, you know, if you want to come here and be welcome in this center, there are some, rules and regulations that you must follow. And these rules and regulations are typical from our countries of origin. They are not Canadian. And these cultural centers can help you stay more isolated and, you know, have a much more narrower scope of life.
I believe I hear what you're saying, and that is the danger. But I think to mitigate the danger, there's actually a strength in Canada, and that's the diversity of cultural centers. The more we have, the better, because then you're allowing people the choice.
Okay.
I was just listening to the commercial just now when we went to commercial break. I am thrilled, even though I didn't understand a word of it, but I was just thrilled that we had a commercial. I believe it was Arabic.
It is, yeah.
Right?
It is.
I think that's wonderful, because imagine if we had a society that said, because you originate from Canada, all your commercials must be in English.
Okay.
Now we have a different Canada. The fact that we have choice, the fact that we have opportunity is what I celebrate. So I would champion and I would rejoice in hearing a commercial like that.
Okay.
Because I think then people have ideas, they have chances and choices. So if a cultural center decided to run in a certain way that is very restrictive, and that you have to behave in a certain way or abide by certain ideology, even then, I suspect they will have trouble, because everybody who walks in there also carried the Canadian human rights with them.
Yeah.
That they can go to another one.
Definitely. But how about, because another very dangerous thing as well is that you find a lot of cultural centers that are embedded inside places of worship. So you might have a place of worship for religion A, B, or C, but this place of worship offers a lot of free services for the youth, for the adults. They can help you find a job. They can like offer you a lot of free services for like recreational services for yourself, for your kids, like food, like back home, and so on and so forth. And again, it's not only a cultural center; it's a religious one too. And so, does this really help you integrate, or does it isolate you? Because now it's not only the cultural barrier, there's also the religious one too. And if you're a good believer and if you abide by our like cultural norms, you have a wide plethora of incredible services for free. And what an incentive.
One of the beauties that Canada has, and it's embedded in our Charter of Rights and Freedom, is the right to religion, and freedom of expression. And so that protects everybody. And so if I decided that this is my religion and this is how I want to abide by my life spiritually, there's nothing wrong with that.
Okay.
As long as I do not affect other institutions in society. So here's a discussion that goes on all the time: religious laws. We hear about that all the time. Well, every religion has laws. There are laws that guide how you marry. There are also laws that guide how you divorce.
Yeah, definitely.
Every religion has that. Yeah. Every religion has guidance on how to raise your children. It's all part of your faith, and it's part of what your spirituality is. But as you practice that, so long as you don't impose it on everybody else who's not part of your faith, you're fine. But if you use that as a weapon, then that's what our justice system, our legal system is there for. So that's why, in a way, there's that balance. There's not one way or the other. It's every way. Everybody. And I'll tell you, when I served in the military, one of my joys was reconnecting and understanding a little bit deeper. I'm not saying I'm an expert of that at all, but understanding Islam.
Okay.
And understanding how beautiful it is as a religion, and how it could actually guide a society like Afghanistan if we were to use that and follow it through. So there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with having Islam in Canada either.
You know, the critical thing about religion is always interpretation.
Yes.
Because, you know, and this is usually how I perceive it, is that when you're reading a religious text, in reality, you're reading yourself. The way you interpret it will be according to your inner self. So there are a lot of gray areas in all religious texts. Some parts that may be interpreted as A, B, or C. One is very peaceful, the other one is very aggressive. One is very inclusive, the other one is very exclusive. So it's always open for interpretation.
Yes. If I decided to have a religion, let's say I'm foolish enough to start my own religion, God forbid.
Okay. So you're starting your own cult now. Yeah.
And I decide to be totally exclusive. Am I free to do that in Canada? Yes. But if I decided in my religion that all vegetables are bad, I might decide never to eat another vegetable again.
Okay.
But it does not give me license to burn down a grocery store.
Of course.
So that's what
Definitely.
So, am I entitled to my own beliefs? Yes. And I think that's the beauty of Canada. We allow different thoughts. We allow different beliefs. And this is part and parcel of what we mean by active citizenship. You become a citizen. You're actively taking part in the society in your own way. And as you said, you interpret it in your own way.
Yeah.
But as you interpret and you make use of it and you exercise your limbs and your muscles of citizenship, you learn from it too.
Yeah.
And I would say that my parents, they wanted to retire and go back to Malaysia. Later on, it was Vancouver. Now it's Toronto. You change. And I think being part of the Canadian experiment, we're not finished with this experiment. Nowhere near. We're continuously growing. Just like 1971 to today, you talked about the difference between Canada of the past and the Canada of today. There's a Canada of the future.
Absolutely.
And that Canada of the future will be very different, and we will entertain our grandchildren with stories about, oh, you know, Canada used to be like this. And they'll roll their eyes and say, grandfather, you're so old.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But this country will grow. And it'll grow because of its people, not in spite of its people. And I think that's the act
because of, not in spite of.
Yeah. And that's the act of citizenship that I think we need. And so as people become Canadian citizens, they now have muscles, they now have limbs, and they make use of it. I think one of the most active things a citizen can do is volunteer.
Definitely.
I think that's one of the secret sauce of Canada. The amount of volunteering that we do as a nation here is very remarkable. But the thing is, when we volunteer, and I see, you know, for example, Muhammad Fakir, who owns Paramount Food, I see the amount of volunteering he makes. He does. For, but you affect yourself.
Yeah, it's a mutual thing. Just a little comment to our viewers and listeners. Like we usually run this program between 7 and 8, but tonight this will be a very exceptional episode because we have a very exceptional guest with us, and we really want to take full benefit of having such a great guest with us like Judge Albert Wong. So we'll be going for another hour. And he kindly agreed to stay with us for an extra hour.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And I hope
I
don't overtire your guests.
No, not at all. I think that like it's a very, very important topic to discuss. You know, again, so we talked about language requirements, staying here, and so on and so forth. But there are some examples here. Somebody who comes here to Canada and takes advantage of every loophole in the system, totally abuses the system, totally drains the system. So they get all the government support. They play with the numbers like crazy, and they hardly pay any taxes at all. They like their job. They always get paid in cash money. And they're living on welfare. They're like, you know, on Ontario Works. They get all the benefits from the government, and they keep bringing a lot of those children there. And those people are extremely reluctant to integrate into the Canadian society, and they keep spreading incredible negative vibes wherever they are. Oh, Canada's this, Canada's that, Canada's this, Canada's that. Oh, I'm dying to go back to my home. I wish I can go back to my home. You know, back home, things were this and that. Things were great. Things were fantastic. While they are taking the maximum benefit from the system. Other people are hardly working, paying taxes, and these taxes go to such people who are like simply being parasitic on the system, never complain as that much. So
I think for someone who wants to do that, as you say, to really draw down on the system and to gain as much advantage as possible with very little effort, it doesn't matter you're immigrant or newcomer or new Canadian, or you've been born here, or your family been here for hundreds of years. It's the same type of people.
Yeah, right? but why allow new of them to
but I would say for every one of those, I'll give you hundreds, if not thousands of people who come and they appreciate the newfound opportunity, the wealth this country has. We are a wealthy country. And do we have a country that can sustain and support people who need a little bit of help? Yes. There's a mother with a child who has autism require extra help. Yes, we need to support that. Do we, is somebody who, like my father who came and started as a janitor, should we allow him to do that? Yes. So we have a wide range of opportunities. How you want to move ahead, now you have the chance. Whereas in other countries around the world, you might not have the chance.
Yeah.
So then the question is, and this is where individual rights come in. If you want to move ahead and you're willing to invest in it, the opportunity is there. It's not dependent on luck. It's not dependent on your access or your connections. It's dependent on what you want to do. And I think that's what defines Canada. So do we have people cheating the system? Of course we do. Of course. That'd be foolish for me to say this, because that's nirvana, and that's not here.
Of course, but
know?
like, why allow them to do that? Like, why, like, you know, we don't have a stronger fist there, like with such people? Because there are a lot of excellent people around the world who would apply to come to Canada as immigrants using all the legal ways possible, using all the legal channels that are out there, and they're not selected.
I think you're mixing a little bit of apples and oranges here.
Yeah.
Let me suggest this. The people who've come, and let's say I've come and I now stop working, you support me. Okay. I would suggest to you, and I don't have the stats, but I would suggest it from what I can see, that's very low. Even I see people working in restaurants. I see people working, even if they don't have the language that you said they are. And so therefore they have to wait till they're 55 to become citizens. Even if they don't have the qualifications, they work very hard. Now, on the other side of the coin, you talk about other people want to come, but then they're falling behind. We have a merit-based system for immigration, as you know, and it all depends on there's many factors and combinations, and it's impossible for me to go into each one of them. But you have to apply, and then you get selected, and then you come. There's also another category, and I think this is what you're touching on: people who claim refugee status.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Now, every refugee who comes in, and anybody who comes in and claims refugee status, whether it's across the border or whether it's at a point of entry or elsewhere, they get documented as a claimant. They're not automatically becoming a refugee.
Okay.
And then they have to prove their qualifications as a refugee before they move on. Of course, we're not going to send you away. We're not going to send you and have you sleep in the border until we decide. We bring you in.
Okay.
You are subject to the laws of the country. You will then go through a legal process, a due process to make sure everybody has a fair hearing. They get to present the case. If their case is of no merit, if there's a decision that there's no merit to their claim, they have a right to appeal. Right? And then they can appeal, and then the next level up can then decide yes or no, whether the first officer had made a mistake or not made a mistake, and then they can go on. Is it an expensive system? Yes. Is it a long process? Yes. But I'd rather have that than extrajudiciary system where an officer can make a decision and it's final. Because then you have a system that's open to corruption. So I'd rather have a system that has good checks and balances.
Okay.
That can say, if I'm stopped by a police officer, I have my day in court, and that the court will be fair, and that I understand the charges against me. I can have representation. I cannot be forced to confess. I have my rights. Even if I'm not a citizen, I still have my rights. And if the court rules against me and I feel that the judge had made a mistake, I can appeal. I think that type of process in this society, especially now, is very important.
Yeah, the due process of law, like all these are like fantastic values that we Canadians are extremely proud of. But unfortunately, if you're not a very these are great loopholes for you to take advantage of.
They are, but the system, right? I mean,
eventually,
yeah, and I'd rather have the eventually than the instant where we punish the innocent.
But isn't this like tax, payers' money coming
Yes.
from taxpayers' money?
But this is part of the commitment that you have with a society. That's the society we decided to build, that we will all contribute. Here's the example I give people. Canada is a society that lines up.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
As Canadians, we line up all the time. We like to line up.
definitely.
Right?
Yeah,
Tim Hortons, we line up in the morning.
yeah, we do.
Right? And God help you if you go to the top of the line, especially at rush hour.
Of course.
They actually will not serve you.
Yes, definitely.
Right?
Very true.
But here's what happens when you have a society that lines up. In a society that lines up, everyone gets served. And everyone will get served in sequence to the same level of service.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When you do not have when you have a society that does not line up, here's what happens.
Favoritism.
The strongest always get served.
Yeah.
And the strongest always get served first. So what happens? Women, children, disabled, and the minority always gets pushed. So I much rather have a system that says, yes, you have equal access like everybody else. Even if you want to cheat the system, you still have equal access. Because by denying you equal access, it's a slippery slope. I might then deny someone who actually deserves it equal access. I much rather err on the side of that, of making sure everybody has it.
Yeah, but a lot of people would argue that this is unfair to some people. Because if I do not reside in Canada for 3 years and I cheat, okay, and then I get the citizenship, but actually at the same time I was going and to other countries, like I'm not far away from my family back home, or I'm making a lot of profit, while another person had to forsake, his family had to leave everything behind and start anew here. And at the end, both of them get the same citizenship. Isn't this extremely unfair?
That's making an assumption they will get a citizenship. You see, part of my job, a big part of my job, the visible part of my job is the citizenship ceremonies. You see me, everybody's very happy. Yeah. I say, congratulations, you swear the oath and then you're becoming a Canadian citizen. That's another part of my job. And we have a lot of offices that do that. They review the files. And if there's questions about the files, they would then refer the files to me for a hearing. So now you have the pleasure of coming to see me, and you have to explain how it is that you qualify. But let me be very clear.
Okay.
Let me also be very clear. Citizenship is granted when you qualify. So now you have 1,095 days of physical presence in Canada in the last 5 years. If you're 1,094 days, you don't qualify.
Okay.
1,095 days, you qualify. Now, once you qualify and you decide to go back to Egypt because you got this great business and hotels, that's wonderful, because you know why? As a Canadian, you have the freedom of mobility. The right to live anywhere. Because, and that's an important right, because then it prevents someone from saying, I do not want you in my neighborhood. He cannot say that. I do not want you in my town. Cannot say that. So that right, that protection of that right is important. So if somebody qualifies for citizenship at 1,095 days, has written and passed the knowledge test, is a permanent resident, and has applied.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
That person becomes you qualify for citizenship, and because you applied, you'll be granted citizenship. We do not say, yes, but will you be a good citizen? We do not ask that.
Okay.
Or we do not say to Canada. We do not ask that. Now, if a person goes and fights against the Canadian military in a war, that's a different story. But thankfully, we haven't had a war like that in a long time.
Yeah.
So when somebody, we look at it from a qualification point of view. We do not look at it from a loyalty point of view. We do not ask you for loyalty.
Okay. Because my initial question was, so I'm a person from country A. I'm a very qualified person, and then we go to the point system, and I'm, like 1 point shy.
Mhm.
just 1 point shy.
Mhm.
So I don't get qualified. I'm not chosen.
Mhm.
And then another person from another country,
Mhm. And
He-
they lied about the qualification.
yeah, they lie about the qualification, or they come as a refugee,
Right.
okay, and they're absolutely not qualified, and they become Canadian citizens.
Okay.
If you evaluate them according to the point system,
Let-
they'll hardly get anything.
Let's split that up. First of all, the refugee does not go through the same system as the point system. And
Definitely,
the fact that
yeah.
we accept one refugee does not mean we accept one less from the point system.
Mhm.
The qualifications are still the same.
So is it
it's
luck?
No, it's a separate program. The refugee, you have to prove that you are a bona fide refugee.
Yeah.
And that's you're facing persecution. There's a different qualification.
Okay.
A different way of qualifying. Okay. So you and I cannot just walk in and say, I want to be a refugee.
Mhm.
And
Okay.
why? Because he didn't like, I didn't like the way he looked at me. That does not qualify you as a refugee.
Okay.
Right. So in a point system, if a person comes in and it's missed the mark, the standard by 1 point,
Mhm.
it really is unfortunate, but that's why the standard's there.
Yeah.
If another person comes in and cheats by forging some documents and getting above that standard so that they can come in, when we find out, we actually go back and take it away.
So citizenship can be revoked at
Yeah,
any
it's
time.
revoked, right? So so for example, we had a big case in Vancouver where we discovered, and it was an RCMP investigation, where we discovered and charged and convicted some people for helping others to forge their documents.
Mhm. Okay.
And not only did we put the person who did it in jail, we then went back and looked at all the files
Mhm. Okay.
and say, did that person qualify in their own right?
So did it in a retroactive manner.
Right.
Yeah, so you went back again, and
Now, have people slipped through? Of course. I mean, I'm not that naive to say. I mean, it's a big world,
yeah,
right? But by and far, maybe I'll come back to this as well. Here's one distinguishing feature that Canadians have, and this is, I formed that by being in the military and going overseas in peacekeeping missions. One thing that Canadians don't like, cheating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's the same as lining up for Tim Hortons.
Yeah.
We just instinctively, as a nation, we don't like when somebody cheats or is caught cheating. And I think that's what distinguishes us as a nation, as a community. So
absolutely.
I'll rather rest of that. But are we compassionate? Yes. Are we generous? Yes. Are we understanding? Yes. Can we be accepting and absorbing? Yes. I'd rather have that too. We don't like cheating, but we don't go all the way back where we suspect everybody's a cheater until you prove to me that you're not a cheater. We don't do that. We rather say, I accept you for who you are. But then if I catch you cheating, now my assessment of you changes.
Okay, and another controversial issue is dual citizenship.
Mm-hmm.
So, what would you say to a person that would come and tell you, you know what, you're not as Canadian as I am, because I'm only Canadian. I never knew any other country. I can only speak English or French.
Oh, I was born here.
Yes, or I was born here, and I don't have any other place to resort to.
Yeah.
So if anything goes wrong to Canada, I'll stay here. I'll fight for Canada.
Mm-hmm.
But for you, it's very easy. You have your other passport. You can always go to the other place. So you are a second-class Canadian. Yeah. What would you say to that person?
Well, to answer your last question, there are no different classes of Canadian. Canadian is, as the Prime Minister said, Canadian is a Canadian is a Canadian.
It's a Canadian, yeah.
Right? And I don't think we should split where we say, okay, I see you as this way or that way. Am I Chinese Canadian? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Am I proud of my Chinese heritage? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
As I get older, I'm probably more proud than when I was a kid. I was trying to hide it when I was a kid. But we all enjoy it. I mean, the fact that I enjoy going to certain restaurants and have food, compared to other restaurants, that's part of my nature. That's part of my life, right? But am I Canadian? Yes. So then let me ask, perhaps position this for your listeners.
Yeah.
It's this way. Have I been, here's an anecdote. I was in university. I was in the military by then, but the military sent me to university. And I was in university, and I had a late night lecture, and I was going to eat dinner at the student cafeteria. Mm-hmm. And this man came up to me and said, "You immigrants, you shouldn't be here. You take jobs away from people, you know, and you know, all the university classes are occupied by you immigrants, right?" I was tired. I have a lecture to go to. I'm going to eat my dinner. So I thought, well, I'm going to try this. I said, "Well, sir, I've sworn my allegiance to the Queen twice. Once when I became a Canadian citizen, and the second time when I joined the armed forces.
Whoa.
How many times have you done it?" And he walked away. Right.
Of course.
But I
of
think
course.
that it's not my loyalty to Canada is not defined by of course it's, you know, by my skin color or my name or even my religion. It's defined by what I do. So here's the point that I would make to anybody. And this is where history, you talk about words are important, history is important.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Of course.
We need to change our historical frame of reference. So I'll use the military context. The number of people who were denied citizenship but yet fought for Canada in the Second World War and the First World War were tremendous. And we should start to recognize that. So, for example, I'll give you a couple examples. Buckam Singh, he came from Punjab as a young man, came to Canada. Really, at that time, there was no way he could have got citizenship. He was considered an alien.
Of course, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
He fought in the First World War. Died in 1919 because of the wounds that he received in the First World War. He's buried in Kitchener-Waterloo, in Kitchener, Ontario. And we don't talk about that in our history book. We don't talk about the Chinese man who was refused enrollment in Kamloops because he was not a Canadian citizen, because he was Chinese, rode his horse over the Rocky Mountains to Calgary in the winter to sign up, and served in the Second World War. I think we need to teach our children about not just the great grand effort Canada made in the First and Second World War. It was phenomenal, the effort that Canada had for the Allies. But we should also talk about that there were other members of the community that fought. And by extension, I would then also point out about the Indian Army. In the First World War and the Second World War, the Indian Army was actually the largest army in the war.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
And I think we need to talk about that, because if we don't talk about it, we'll keep repeating I call the poison.
Definitely. And another example is, I'm a brand new immigrant here. These are my very first few days. And then, you know, like I see you. I see another person who has, you know, like there's a stereotype in my head. So Canada is in the northwest. So people from the north, I have this stereotype. People from the west have this stereotype. And I look at you, you don't look 1% like that. So you know what? Probably Mr. X here is much more Canadian than you. Right. What would you say to that person?
I would say, let's talk. If you think that I'm less of a Canadian, I'd like to know why you think that. Chances are you and I would never talk anyway, right? But I'm hoping, and this is why maybe my service becomes important, and service of other people of visible minority in the military becomes important, because the more you see them in uniform, the more you see women in uniform, the more you see people of color in uniform, it opens your eyes.
Yeah.
The more you see a young Egyptian woman who is a family doctor, it opens your eyes. When you see in York Regional Police, there's a wonderful young woman who's from Iran, and she's a police detective, it opens your eyes. I think we need to do that. I'll give you a couple of stories, and I'm sorry I bore your guests with stories.
No,
I was in a round table with the mayor of Markham one day, and the chief of police was there. And we were talking about what it means multicultural, because, you know, Markham is very multicultural, and Mayor Scarpetti loves it that he has so many, and he practiced all these languages,
Okay.
and songs in different languages. There was a young man, not a young man, a community representative from Armenia. He was sitting there, and he said, "I have to tell you, I came to Canada. I was new, just like you said. I was brand new. I'm driving down Highway 7, and suddenly there's a police car behind me, and the siren goes.
Okay.
I pull over, and he said, I came from Armenia, and he said I was shaking because now it's the police. I'm in trouble."
Yeah.
Right?
Okay. Yeah.
And he said I was shaking. So the police officer walks up and tells me, I roll down the window. And this is a long time ago. This is in the 70s. And the police officer says, "Good morning, sir."
Whoa. Okay.
And he said, I suddenly realized I was now in Canada.
Good morning, sir. Yeah.
This is different.
Yeah.
And I said, later on, I said to the Chief Joliffe, I said, oh my God, just think of how much this police officer has helped this man in Canada. Just by his manners. Good morning, sir. A person of authority in uniform who has the power of arrest can say, good morning, sir, and it changed this man's perception of what this country is. And I think that's how we combat that, how we conduct ourselves. The fact that we line up at Tim Hortons changes something. The fact that we're going to see somebody in distress, an older person in a wheelchair, we help that person, changes something. The fact that my children will volunteer and will help homeless people, for example, changes something. Is it utopic? No. Is it nirvana? I'm not trying to create nirvana, but I'm just doing it one step at a time, and if I can influence one person. So when I have a young, she was Iranian, actually, and she was a naval officer. And I had her in one of my ceremonies. And she was born in Iran, actually escaped Iran and came to Canada as a refugee. And she's now serving in the Canadian military, in the Navy. And I watched all the Iranian and Middle Eastern women in the audience. And they all, one by one, came up to her after when we were taking pictures and wanted to kiss her on both cheeks.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I think we changed something. I think that's how we do it, by example. And the more you and I can encourage our young people to take up positions of responsibilities and get so that they can become the role model for the next generation, we change Canada. So I think that's that active citizenship I keep talking about. That's it there.
Definitely. Many people from, like, you know, the general stereotype people have in their mind is Anglophones, Francophones, like people who are originally European and mostly from English or French backgrounds. That's not to say that, like, you know, the Chinese, for example, like played a major role in connecting Canada.
The railway.
Yeah, the railway, exactly. Connecting Canada coast to coast. It was thanks to the Chinese, and at the time, the Chinese had to pay a head tax. They had to pay a head tax just because they're Chinese, although they did like most of the work, but they had to pay a head tax. So, you know, there are like those people out there who would say that, you know, like Canadians are mostly the people from English background or, like, you know, or French background only. And because, like, I'm a 6th generation or 10th generation Canadian, but you're just brand new here. And
then I say, talk to a First Nations person and they'll tell you how many generations they've been here.
Perfect, exactly.
But let me also tell, and this is where the history book becomes important as well. We learn that in the First Nations community, indigenous population, there's the indigenous peoples, and then there's the Inuit, and then there's the Métis. And we learned that the Métis is really a combination of European
and First Nations.
First Nations. Yeah. Do you know there are Métis who are Chinese and First Nations? And you know where they came from? The railroad. Many of the Chinese workers who came from the railroad ended up being let go after it was built.
Okay.
And there was, and even when it was been built, even when the railroad, and in BC especially, they were left on their own and they were starving.
Oh.
And the First Nations community took them in.
Mm-hmm.
And so there were some marriages there.
Whoa. Okay.
And there are people of Métis. I call them Métis, maybe I'm wrong,
Yeah.
but they're First Nations and Chinese. And I think in the end, that's where the future of Canada is. When our children grow up and they meet other people of different cultures and religions, and they're so comfortable that somewhere along the way, they might decide to marry.
Mm-hmm.
We just created a whole new Canadian.
And don't you see an irony here that, people are not allowing you or are afraid that you will do to them what they did to others? So we came from, across the Atlantic, and we came to this new land completely at the very end of the 15th century. And so on, we started settling, and we took it over completely from its original owners. And we created our own, land and our own comfort zone. Now they want to deny this right to other new immigrants. Well, you have there are no blood ties between you and this land.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing for the new immigrants. That do you think that some people from backgrounds who have been here for 500 years are starting to be really afraid because the new blood is taking over? The future of Canada will not be solely theirs.
I think it's an issue that the world is wrestling with right now.
Mm-hmm.
You look at different countries and how it's, let's close the border, let's build fences.
Yeah.
In Europe, for example. To me, it's a question of confidence. Does your population have confidence that they will progress, that they'll grow, their children will be fundamentally better than they are? That's the confidence that I think we as human beings look for. And so let me suggest this. When we come into this land, and now in Canada, because of a lot of recognition now of what had happened to the First Nations, to the Indigenous population, it's common and in fact almost de rigueur that you start any speech with the land acknowledgement. And you hear that everybody use I recognize the land, et cetera, et cetera. Here's what I want to do. I want to tell people this.
Yeah.
As you listen to the land acknowledgement, maybe it's time so that it does not become just a saying like good morning.
And it's an extra thing that was added recently
Yes,
to
it's
the
very
oath.
recent.
Yeah.
But not to the oath, but it will probably come.
Yeah.
But I think we need to reflect on what that land acknowledgement really means.
Mm-hmm.
So let me give you an example. Do we really own this land, the land that I happen to be standing on? Or is it because I'm happy to be here and the land is sustaining me? And I should be happy with the fact that I've been sustained by this land, that I have the air to breathe, I have the water to drink and to wash, I have the soil to grow food for me.
Yeah.
And maybe it's incumbent on me because I'm using that land that I steward it. I make sure that it's still there for the next generation.
Mm-hmm.
That's your that is your First Nations philosophy. Mm-hmm. That's what they've been doing for thousands of years. They don't say you cannot come in. What they say is, please come in, and what I have is also yours. But as we share this land, let's look after it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the message that we in Canada and all Canadians, if I can suggest this, need to fully understand, because that's how, in my mind, that's how we can combat climate change.
And do you think another factor is that because, you have the point system and the, immigration system is very selective. Mm-hmm. So the majority of new immigrants are above average. They're very, very strong competitors. And they came from many things that Canadians here take for granted are unheard of in other countries, like democracy, like freedom, like equality, like being given the same opportunity, like fair play,
clean air,
all these things. So when people coming who are oppressed for a very long time, but are very smart people as well, they come to this human-made paradise, they would excel. And then like they would take over. They, like when they enter a competition with those people who have been taking everything here for granted and so relaxed, they would beat them like with flying colors. And isn't this one of the reasons that making them really afraid, that they are feeling that in the future they'll be in the back lines?
No, I think they will, like the immigrant story that we like to hear and we talk about is that everybody succeeds. It is a struggle. It is still a very hard job to do when you come to a new country.
Of course.
Without any family, without any support system, you're making it on your own. And so I would not in one brush say everybody is successful and everybody will excel. The thing is, the sense of competition in Canada is very different than competition maybe in the rest of the world, in the sense that we believe in fairness as well. Having said that, do most immigrants have successful businesses? They start successful business? Yes, because they work hard at it, right? The sacrifice is there. So if one is willing to make sacrifice, you'll see it. And you know, especially in the high tech world now, and especially in the innovative economy, when I swear people and I see people coming in with all these bright ideas on what to do next. But I also see young Canadians coming out of universities also doing the same thing. What we need to do better is how to encourage them to get into these type of economies faster. So let me give you an example. The number of people I swear in that are plumbers, electricians, mechanics, carpenters, all these trades that we tend to look down on. But you know what? Is 0% unemployment rate for these guys right now and gals right now. And we should encourage them. You know, I had a young man today, he's an artist. Wonderful. A musician. Great. And then I have people working in the gaming industry.
Okay.
You know, as an artist. And I think that's wonderful. So this society of ours is very big, it's very broad, it accepts a lot of people. And what we ask them to do is to say, come, make use, just like the First Nations did, come, make use of the land, but be active, protect the land, help us become a stronger community. You know, the city of Guelph, for example, I'll tell you, for skilled labor is a 0% unemployment rate. That's why they keep looking for temporary foreign workers.
Whoa.
Right? There's a community in London, Ontario, and actually, I'll come back to your earlier question about language. They came from Myanmar, Burma. The Karens. They're never going to pass the language test because they never went to school. They never had that opportunity to study. But when you look at them, they're doing 2 jobs each. They are working in your chicken factories, your agriculture sectors. They're
very hard workers.
Very hard for minimum wage. Why? Their children. They want their children to go to school. And so one of the changes that we had done in the last Citizenship Act was we allowed the children to independently become Canadian citizens ahead of their parents.
Okay.
So they did not have to wait for mom and dad to turn 55. So we have young children, 16 years old, who's becoming a Canadian citizen because she was here. She's going to school.
Okay.
So but you know the reality of the family is she's the one doing the translating for the parents anyway. So to make her and allow her to become a Canadian citizen, I think is one of the best things we can do to help that family. Mom and dad, God bless them, they'll continue to work in this harsh, and they'll work hard. They'll work very hard, and they'll save money, and they'll buy their first house for the children. And imagine when you tell mom and dad, you cannot become Canadian citizens yet because you probably cannot pass the language test. but your children will.
Okay.
Imagine the relief,
Of course.
right? And I think that's Canada.
Absolutely. Let's take our very last musical break, and we'll definitely be back. Don't go away.
We are one. Around the world and the universe, we are one. North, south, east to west, we are one. Glowing hearts full of love, we are one. A blessing from above.
No matter where we're from, we are one. We are one. We are one. Oh, Canada, our precious native land, our Canada. We all work hand in hand, and we stand together. Nothing can go wrong. All the people from around the world, that's what makes us strong. This place we all call our home, the land of the free. Together we can build our lives, a place for you and me. Yeah.
We are one. 158 all across the nation. Around the world and the universe, we are one.
We are one, yeah.
North, south, east and west, we are one. World, let's join the celebration. Glowing hearts full of love, we are one.
Hearts so full of
Blessings from
love.
above.
No matter where you're from, we are one. We are one. We are one.
We are one. We are one. We're back again. And time really flies when you're with such a distinguished guest as we have today. And so let me try to really condense a lot of
Sure, and I promise to be short.
a lot of points here. Thank you very much for your cooperation. So many people wonder about the feelings of the First Nations. So I came to your house, and this is something that maybe it's a double question. Actually, it's a two-sided question, because one of the things that Canada, I think, is excels at, and it's really different from many other countries. To become a Canadian citizen, it is mandatory that you would study the Canada Study Guide. And in the Canada Study Guide, it tells you about the very unfair treatment the Aboriginals had, the boarding schools that they were forced to go to, and if they did not assimilate, they were subject to physical and psychological, punishment. Again, they talk about the extreme discrimination that the Chinese people faced. They had to pay head taxes. They also talk about the discrimination that Ukrainians faced during World War I, because they were considered to be subjects of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And they talk about the discrimination that the Japanese faced during World War II, because they were considered to be aliens. And this is something they do not hide. For you to become a Canadian, you must know these things. As a child, you study these things at school. So, I think, and please correct me if I'm wrong, this is the safeguard. This is the guarantee that you will not repeat it again. The difference between an adult and a child is that you learn from your mistakes. So the reason a child, a child would, if you put in front of a child a piece of charcoal, okay, and a potato, probably he'll go for the charcoal because of the light that's coming out of it, not the potato. But an adult will not do it because he learned that charcoal is dangerous. Right. So Canada is always teaching its people this negative history in order not to relive it.
I think it's our history.
Yeah.
It's a lot of things had been wronged, and we need to make amends. And that's why the reconciliation effort is very important. And we all have a role to play in the reconciliation effort. It doesn't mean that just because I'm a newcomer, it's not my problem. It's now that I'm a Canadian, it becomes my issue as well.
Definitely.
I would do this to everyone. There is, and it's recent history. It's not like it's going back a long way. It's recent. So, for example, in Six Nations, which is in Brantford, Ontario, just outside of Toronto, outside of Hamilton, one of the last residential school in operation was there. It closed in 1990s. You can go see it. There's a museum there now.
Yeah.
I encourage everyone to do that. Whether you're a Canadian and you've been here for centuries, your family, or you're brand new and you just arrived, go take a look. Go talk. Understand. I think that understanding is what we need.
Definitely. And done still, a lot of work needs to be done. But I think this is one of the great things in Canada. All countries in the world, with no exception, have a negative history. There is a negative part in their history, but most countries tend to conceal this, and they'd only reveal the bright side, and would always depict themselves as, like defenders of good and truth and virtue, and everybody else is the evil one. But Canada shows both things side by side very, very clearly and very openly.
Could I just jump in here?
Sure.
And perhaps this is one of the beauties of Canada. You see, we do not swear an oath of allegiance to the flag or to, the motherland. Instead, we have a system of governance that's based on constitutional monarchy that has survived so many years, and it allows us to adapt and change our way of life as we grow. That's why when I say, in 1973, nobody knew what a mango was. And that allows us to grow. And I think that people, we grow.
Definitely. And another thing as well that, that is very important to discuss is during the last elections, for instance, and it happens all the time, but unfortunately during the last provincial elections here and I'm sorry, the last federal elections that we had here in Canada, it was extremely obvious that there were a lot of divisive speeches that were given, and it was like a game, a football game, like a soccer game, like a basketball game between two competing teams. And unfortunately, the political rhetoric, the political speeches were given some racial, ethnic, and religious flavors. So when you vote for party A, it's as if you're voting for your background, for your religion, etc., etc. And because if you do not vote for this party, the other party will totally annihilate you.
Yeah. Let me start by offering the caveat that as a citizenship judge, I'm apolitical. So I would not ascribe to any political party. In fact, because of my role as a citizenship judge, and maybe your listeners would be interested to know, I cannot be a member of a party. I cannot donate to a party. And in fact, I cannot even put up a sign outside my house.
Okay.
But that's how strictly we make our positions as a judge, a citizenship judge, apolitical. Having said that, do we have a rhetoric that is disturbing in Canada? Yes, and you hear it sometimes in some of our media sources. I think Canadians are actually smart enough. And here's a fundamental difference that we have in our sense of governance. You see, in Canada, because we believe in responsible government, that's our system of governance. The government is the party that has the confidence of the House. So we actually elect a member of parliament or a member of provincial parliament here in Ontario, or a member of legislative assembly. And it's that member who then goes to the House and legislature to vote for whoever they want to be the leader, the prime minister or premier.
Yeah.
And if they find that that's not suitable, they will then vote him out.
And there's a confidence vote.
There's a confidence vote.
Yeah.
Or they can change. So that is the difference compared to you must be loyal to one party or the other.
Mm-hmm.
That you have to accept everything that the party has to say. So you hold the person you hold in account in our political system is your member.
And
grassroots.
And like, this is something that would be very precious to hear from you. Canada is a constitutional monarchy.
Mm-hmm.
So there is the rule of law,
Mm-hmm.
and constitution is above everyone, and law is above everyone.
Mm-hmm.
There is no one who is above the law.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a country of institutions, not individuals.
Mm-hmm.
And it has certain values that are, guarded by the Constitution.
Mm-hmm.
So, because some people have this illusion, and this is the rhetoric that was there. So some people believe, because unfortunately from their cultural backgrounds, that if I did not vote for party A and then party B wins, and then I sleep the next morning, I'll be kicked out of Canada, or I'll be deprived of my basic rights. How realistic is this?
And that's not true.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because no matter who is in governance, whoever has been elected to govern this country, you still have the full rights under the charter, and you have the freedoms under the charter,
Mm-hmm.
and that will become sacred. And one of the number of, you talk about the importance of institutions. One of the institutions that I highlight are your courts. They're truly independent. That's why I explained to you I have to be apolitical.
Mm-hmm.
That's why you will not see an election sign outside my door.
Okay.
You will not see me going to a party function. I cannot donate to a party,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's why it's so important as an institution. Another institution that's actually very important to Canada is the media.
Yeah.
The freedom of the media. And if you look at how the media holds other people to account and themselves to account, I might add, that's important. Education. I think education and the way we teach our children how they are to observe our Constitution is very important. I was in a class, I know the time is short, but I was in a grade 6 class. I taught the grade 6 class. It was a wonderful class in Toronto, Scarborough. I forget the name of the school. You know what the first question was? Why did Canada choose constitutional monarchy as its form of democracy?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I wish more adults would ask me that, not just grade 6.
Definitely, yeah, perfect. Actually, and one of the great experiences that children here in Canada enjoy is, like, you have these mock elections that
Mm-hmm.
take place in schools,
Mm-hmm.
and the great thing is the results are not always the same.
No.
I don't want to mention the names of parties here, but we like, definitely we have the Liberals won, not with a complete majority here, and then you had the Conservatives coming second. When they did the elections at school, because most people would think, oh, children will just vote like their parents did. Actually, no, because the results in the schools across Canada were different.
And I think this is where perhaps the Canadian experiment is so different, because we emphasize on choice.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe in some communities, some parents are upset because they don't have the same control over their children as they would if they were in a different country. I accept that. However, we value the capacity of our youth here in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why Canada has such a bright future, because we have youth from different backgrounds, from different religions, from different impressions and opinions.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that clash of opinions and clash of backgrounds that will make a new Canada.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think that's why we're different.
Definitely.
And so strong.
Definitely. And again, time is running, but I'll put two questions in one here. Like, how do you see the future of Canada, and what needs to be done? And because Canada is a peacekeeping country, is a very peaceful country, but some people lately, and there is this political rhetoric that no, Canada needs to be more aggressive. Canada should be a little bit more lenient with regards to human rights, because when we fight for human rights, we might lose a lot of good trade partners.
Yes. Let me put it this way.
Yeah.
We won the Nobel Peace Prize. Canada was one of the recipients of the Nobel Peace Prize for peacekeeping. And Prime Minister Lester Pearson started the peacekeeping concept.
Yeah.
But you look at our records during the war. We're not a peacekeeping country. We believe in peace. We're a peaceful nation. We believe in peace. However, we're willing to fight for that peace.
Mm-hmm.
So look at our record in the Second World War, look at our record in the First World War, and in all the other wars. And so I would say this to you, and I say this internationally when I was overseas. Do not mistake my politeness for weakness.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Can Canada, what's the future for Canada? I think through our youth, I come back to our youth and our children again. Through our youth, Canada can become a beacon to the world, a beacon of hope.
And what is still needed to be done? Because another thing, again, people criticize Canada for, and a lot of people are surprised, for instance, to know that the international time zone is a Canadian invention. Heart pacemaker is a Canadian invention. Canadarm is a Canadian invention. Like for
insulin.
Yeah, insulin exactly is a Canadian invention. Like the real inventors of the light bulb are Canadians. It's not Edison. Edison just bought the patent. Like the inventor of basketball is Canadian. The inventor of the telephone, Alexander Graham Bell, is Canadian. And they say, like, but why doesn't Canada talk about itself much? Like, why isn't there this propaganda about Canada?
Partly because I think, again, we live in a northern country. We live in a very cold country. We live in a country where if you decide to do it by yourself, you will not survive.
Mm-hmm.
We live in a country where we share things. We shovel somebody else's sidewalk or because you have to help. When somebody gets stuck in the snow, we push the car. So we come from that type of country. We also come from a country that is used to a lot of resources. Where we can share is our ideal.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we need to be, yes, we did a lot of good things, but I think the beacon of hope, and again, I say we can be a beacon of hope for the rest of the world, and it's through our youth. Our ability to coexist and survive and thrive as a community, a diverse community, is that beacon of hope.
So we don't really need to be that bombastic like other countries.
I don't think so. And then this again, we say sorry all the time.
Yeah. And thank you. Definitely.
Yes.
Yeah. Actually, Canadians are very much criticized very frequently and sometimes by our neighbors to the south that we're extra polite.
But again, like I said, when I was internationally, don't mistake my politeness for weakness.
Absolutely.
It does not mean that I'm weak just because I choose to be polite.
Absolutely. And actually, this is the maximum strength, that you can curb your anger. You curb your feelings. You're the real master of yourself. Mm-hmm. So your instinct doesn't control you. You're the real boss. You can control yourself. You can curb yourself.
Look at you, jiu-jitsu our way out of this one.
Exactly. So really, Judge Albert, I cannot thank you enough for being here. Time really flew by, but it was a real great experience for myself, and I'm quite sure it was the same for a lot of our great audience and here. And yeah, this is Canada. This is our Canada for all of us. This land is your land. This land is my land. It is our land. And never, ever to forget the great, great, great value of the First Nations, who preserved this great land for over 11,000 years. Without their great work and effort in the past 10,500 years, we would never have enjoyed this land. We owe a lot to them. We need to work a lot more for them. They are the real owners of this land, and they're so generous and kind to allow us to be here and share this land with them. This, we are strong because, we are strong because of our differences, not in spite of them.
Mm-hmm.
This is what makes us strong. We are we're getting the best of all minds in the world combined. We are a mini world. And this is how we should stay. And this is the future of Canada. When your child, my child, they go to school, all these different barriers, they fall. All these walls that parents might be making, they fall. And the future is theirs. This is the future of Canada. The beautiful Canada, the multicultural Canada, the most diverse Canada. Canada is your Canada and my Canada. Thank you very much, everyone, for having us tonight. It was an exceptional episode by all means, with a very exceptional guest. And until we meet again next Thursday, thank you very much. Have a beautiful night. And our Arabic speakers, please don't forget, we'll be meeting together this coming Monday between 7 and 9. Thank you very much again, and take good care.